Still Peter, still here, same day. You're going to hear a lot of crazy stuff out of Russia over the next several hours and several days. You're going to hear that Prigozhin is having conversations with military commanders. You're going to be hearing stories about military commanders flipping sides. You're going to be hearing about defections within Wagner itself, of people going the other direction. You're going to hear about assassination attempts on all sides. You're going to hear about the Chechens siding with Prigozhin and Wagner or against, or you're going to hear about them going home. You're going to hear about the Russians blowing up bridges on the way to Moscow so Wagner can't make it. You're going to hear about forces gathering along the way. You're going to be hearing about airstrikes on Prigozhin because Wagner is so terrifying that the Russian military doesn't want to engage. You're going to hear lots of stuff. Some of it will even be true. Most of it won't. The problem here is that we are in an information vacuum, or something worse, that it's been filled with misinformation. So a couple things to keep in mind. First of all, there is no free press in Russia. There hasn't been for 20 years. That was one of the first things that Putin did when he took over. He removed all the satirical shows, he removed all the news shows, he removed all the investigative shows, and it became basically a one-man government and a one-state propaganda system that has become more and more and more intense, especially since the onset of the Donbass war back in 2014. So official news channels are limited, and any time a Westerner tries to get in there to do some reporting, the Russians tend to arrest them on drug or sedition charges. And in fact, you've got a number of high-level journalists that are in jail right now awaiting trial and or execution. So the normal methods of getting information are thin. Folks like me, especially since 2014, have really relied on Twitter because it's basically crowdsourced information. And there was always a battle between the Russian bots and the Russian trolls on one side and the people who are trying to get information out on the other. And when we got to the start of the war in February of last year, the bots and the trolls just went away because a lot of governments and a lot of institutions, including Twitter, did a big crackdown on Russian misinformation. But then Elon Musk took over the operation, and in the time since, he has pushed down, they had the algorithm push down the relevance of anything involving Russia and Ukraine, so it's actually below things like vaccine misinformation and election misinformation in terms of what gets brought up to the top. He's banned or shadow banned a huge number of accounts that I used to depend upon for knowing on what's going on in Kiev and Moscow. And most importantly, he's allowed the bots and the trolls to come back in force. So there's easily 2, maybe even 3 times as many bots and trolls from Russia on Twitter today. Not just that these are sources of misinformation, they're not all on the same side in this coup. Some of them are violently ultranationalist, and they tend to side with Prigozhin and Wagner. Others are clearly employees of the state. And so now Twitter has become an utter shit show of these various factions, misinformation factions, trying to shout each other down about what's going on in Russia. I don't really believe any of them. And so confirmation in this sort of environment just takes forever because, if you don't get live video, it's really hard to confirm if something's actually happening. And now we've got Elon and Putin and Prigozhin all with their own narratives of what's going on, and keeping track of it is just going to be a nightmare. Now, this will sort out over the next several days as the reality of events on the ground overtakes the propaganda machine, and things are moving very quickly. And all of those things that I outlined at the beginning those are all feasible outcomes, but obviously they can't all happen at the same time. So I will do my best to parse through them. I will try to lead with the things that I have confirmed, just like I did in the first video of this series. But it's going to be really, really messy, and there's no way around that. One more thing about the propaganda side of this. While we have a good idea of which side the trolls are on and which side the bots are on, there's all of Russia's disinformation channels internationally that are all of a sudden up in the air. So, like, what's going to happen to Hungary's Viktor Orban, who has basically become a pro-Russian shill within the European Union? Is he in favor of Putin holding on to control, or does he like a more militaristic Russia because it would be more of a foil to be used in the European Union? What about people like Tucker Carlson, who have gone in hook, line, and sinker with the Putin side of things, now that you have more of a nationalist firebrand who we might find more ideological attractive in Prigozhin? What about people like RFK Jr., who have recently become on the Russian doll, or old-timer folks like Jill Stein of the Green Party. All of these commitments that the Russians have cultivated very carefully over the last decade are all of a sudden completely up in the air, and we just don't know how it is all going to fall.